call the honourable member for Bennelong.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. The Albanese Labor government is committed to leaving a better world for future generations. We want to ensure that our kids, grandkids and each generation that comes after that inherit a planet that is healthy, vibrant and sustainable. We know that repairing our environment is not easy, but it will be a collective effort. And that's why we're proposing to work with landholders, including farmers and First Nations communities, to take action on creating a more sustainable Australia. Whether it's through planting native species, repairing damaged riverbeds and removing invasive species, we want to do the work to restore and retain the natural beauty and wonder of our great country. That's why the Nature Repair Market Bill is a groundbreaking piece of legislation that will make it easier for people to invest in activities that will help repair our country and our planet. By creating a market for nature repair, we're providing an opportunity for those who care about the environment and the longevity of our planet to collaborate and contribute to its restoration and preservation. The purpose of the Nature Repair Market Bill 2023 is to provide a framework to establish a voluntary national market in biodiversity certificates. The bill will allow for project proponents to undertake projects to enhance and protect Australia's biodiversity, which can then be applied to the Clean Energy Regulator, where one can obtain a biodiversity certificate. Australia is one of 17 mega-diverse countries, with a disproportionate political responsibility for conservation and biodiversity management. Even though Australia occupies just 5% of the world's landmass, we support almost 12.5% of vertebrate animals. They are fish, amphibians, reptiles, birds and mammals, and 8% of all described plant, animal and fungal species. In addition, 85% of Australia's plants, animals, reptiles and amphibians are endemic, that is, they are found nowhere else. The most recent State of the Environment Report 2021, released by the Minister for the Environment in July 2022, held back and hidden by the former government, but rightfully released by the Minister for the Environment soon after our election in May 2022, that found that Australia's native plant and animal species are in poor or very poor and deteriorating state. Our aquatic ecosystems are also in a poor state, with the aquatic ecosystem condition in southern, eastern and south-western Australia in a very poor state. Marine habitats, species and ecosystem processes are in a predominantly good and stable condition. However, reefs and reef-associated species are in a poor condition and deteriorating. What the State of the Environment Report brings to light is the mounting cumulative impacts of a multitude of poorly addressed threats to biodiversity, including climate change, habitat disturbance and land clearing, invasive species, fishing, extractive industries and pollution. Threats that were ignored and, in the case of this report, were hidden by the former Liberal government. Leading Australian scientists have identified 19 Australian ecosystems that are already collapsing, and some of these include the Murray-Darling River Basin and the Great Barrier Reef, which have, until now, underpinned significant sectors of the Australian economy. There have been many studies that have explored the adequacy of funding for biodiversity conservation in Australia, the funding need and the direct value of ecosystem services provided by nature. These studies found that Australia spends just 15% of what is needed to avoid extinctions and recover threatened species, as we have spent approximately $2 billion annually for 30 years, which could restore 13 million hectares of degraded land without affecting intensive agricultural urban areas. On top of this, approximately half of Australia's GDP has a moderate to very high direct dependence on ecosystem services provided by nature. In the last quarter of 2022, the Minister of the Environment formally presented the Albanese government's response to both the State of the Environment Report and the Samuel Review. This includes the Threatened Species Action Plan towards zero extinction. The revision of the former government's Threatened Species Action Plan includes new objectives preventing new extinctions and a commitment to conserving and protecting at least 30% of Australia's landmass. And if you look at the State of the Environment Report, that's the very least that we can do. The Minister has put forward the Nature Positive Plan, which is better for the environment and better for business. Now that commitments made in the lead-up to the election have been formalised and the government has responded to the Salmon Review, this nature-positive plan brings forward reforms including reform of the EPBC Act, centering on national environment standards, the creation of an independent Environmental Protection Agency, greater use of regional planning and improved conservation planning arrangements, reform of environmental offsets, creation of a nature repair market, increasing access to environmental data and information, and bettering working relationships with our First Nations people. The Minister described this nature-positive plan as the biggest environmental reform agenda in a generation. The Minister has indicated that legislation to implement reforms to the EPBC Act will be released as an exposure draft before the end of this year, and I look forward to contributing on that bill. The NRM bills, which we're discussing today, Deputy Speaker, are timely, and they will empower the Minister to make biodiversity assessment instruments and methodology determinations, setting out specific requirements for how distinct types of biodiversity projects may be implemented. It will establish the important Nature Repair Market Committee to advise the Minister, including on whether biodiversity assessments instruments are appropriate and whether determinations are consistent with the standards, and they'll require the CER to maintain an online platform to facilitate trading in these biodiversity certificates, because we know that biodiversity and nature are greatly important to Australia, not only to underpin cultural and spiritual systems, but they provide educational, scientific opportunities and provide a critical ecosystem for services which underpin our economic and social systems, not only here in Australia, but the world over. The efforts of parties under the Biodiversity Convention, which is an international agreement, they've largely failed, which has led to the establishment of further biodiversity frameworks. This framework outlines 4 high-level goals to be achieved by 2050 and 23 action-oriented targets to be achieved by 2030, including at least 30% of areas of degraded terrestrial land to be restored. This is an incredibly important step. Prior to the development of that framework, it was determined that more funding needs to be put towards this, and this bill will help establish markets to provide a mechanism to do that. The Nature Repair Market Bill is a way for the Albanese Labor government to deliver on its plan through establishment of this market. It will make it easier for businesses and individuals to protect nature through investing in projects, and in a world where we know climate change is having a real impact on the day-to-day, but also an impact on our economy, we're working very hard to ensure Australia is habitable and safe for generations to come. Investment in conservation and restoration is imperative for a nature-positive future, and it's important that businesses have the opportunity to prevent environmental decline by investing in the very environment that they benefit from. We know that greenwashing is a problem and something that our regulators are actively investigating. Through this bill, we'll provide a mechanism for businesses to have the opportunity to invest in something that will really make a difference, something we know that will be regulated and above board. We also know that Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples will be able to promote their unique knowledge in establishing the market. Establishing the market in legislation would ensure its integrity, ensure investment in nature and create environmental improvements across Australia. Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples will also have greater employment and economic opportunities, as they will be able to design projects on their land and waters that reflect the connection they have to the country. This market will operate in parallel with a carbon market in order to encourage carbon farming projects that deliver benefits for biodiversity. The approach will be efficient and draw upon lessons learnt from prior involvements in the carbon market, reflected continuously throughout the development of the environmental market. And transparency is so important as part of this bill. Detailed information about projects and certificates will be available to be accessed by the public. Information will be consistently published by a regulator, and the relevant data will be released by the Department of Climate Change, Energy, the Environment and Water. This will allow the Parliament and, importantly, the public to monitor the scheme, to provide feedback and to have confidence in the scheme. The Department is committed to working with the ACCC and ASIC to prevent greenwashing claims from certificates used in Nature Repair Market. It's important that the statements made about certificates are accurate and that they reflect the projects they represent, rather than being misleading. In prior decades, successive governments have failed to address the key drivers of a cumulative loss in biodiversity, such as land clearing, intensive agriculture and intensive resource projects. It's imperative that these issues are addressed as soon as possible in order to prevent the consequences that they bring about. That's what this repair market bill is all about, and the establishment of this market. The issue of comprehensive reform of our national environmental laws in order to adequately protect Australia's unique biodiversity remains high on the Albanese Labor government's agenda. These bills provide an outline for the creation of the market in biodiversity certificates, allowing the private sector to price something that is invaluable for the purposes of their claim. It's a good way for our good corporate citizens to get involved in repairing our environment. The key elements of this repair market bill will be provided in subordinate legislation, including rules, biodiversity assessment instruments and methodology determinations. The bill and explanatory memorandum will allow the development of methodologies to focus on the restoration and protection of habitat that is critical for threatened species and ecological communities. These bills will address the need to live on a more sustainable planet that can be enjoyed by us and future generations to come, and I commend them to the House.
I thank the honourable member for Bennelong. The question is that the amendment